Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. We're on the FanDuel set at Radio Row. Gentlemen, the time has finally come. We've dipped into the previews throughout the week, throughout the last 2 weeks. But now we dig a little deeper. We give our predictions. Ruiz, how long have you had your prediction ready for this game?
For like 2 weeks. Honestly, for like
really?
2 months. No, I've been like trying to remind myself every time I've done a pod to not spoil my prediction. Yeah. But now I'm ready. I'm itching to get it out there.
He's ready. Diante, how you feeling?
Pretty good, but Steven's much better than me. I feel like I've had this podcast on like 9 different occasions, at dinners, walking around with buddies, in the media. But yeah, I'm ready. I've been ready for this for 2 weeks. We probably could have previewed this show right after the championship games, and I don't know if my takes would have been too much different now than then.
That's the fun part, though. You got everything ready by the time you get here, but then you have a conversation with someone on Radio Row or on a walk or something, and you're like, should I rethink my initial take? So we're going to get into all of it. We're going to start with the Chiefs offense versus the Eagles defense, then do the other side of the ball, matchups, what we're watching, all that. And then we'll, of course, end with our predictions. Our contest, gentlemen. I'm still alive. Ruiz has been the front runner this entire time. We do 3 props every single week, the entire season. Ruiz has been the front runner. Diante, you're out of it, but valiant effort. Still had a solid season. I got to go 3-0. Ruiz has to go 0-3, and I tie him, and then we determine a tiebreaker.
You got the ESPN social graphic where it's like eliminated in the playoff when the team gets eliminated, and you're like the Bengals making a late charge.
Late charge.
You're Joe Burrow in
Here we go.
Getting some MVP votes.
Bring Jamar Chase back. All right, here we go. Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense. I think when we first talked about this matchup, I said this is kind of one of the things I'm most interested in. It's just Vic Fangio, been in the NFL forever, has faced every different type of quarterback, every different type of offense. There's been all this talk in the last 5 years about the Fangio system all across the NFL. No one's really been able to replicate it. He has the best defense in the NFL, according to DVOA, and now he goes up against Patrick Mahomes. Ruiz, when you look at this matchup, just the approach from either side, what you've got your eyes on?
It's Patrick Mahomes' reaction to that style of defense that Vic Fangio plays, the bend but don't break, which I think was very much a reaction to Patrick Mahomes' early success. Like throughout the league, everyone wanted a way to stop him. They looked at Vic Fangio's defense and was like, this might be the way. But Mahomes evolved. Like, I think the story of this Super Bowl starts with that Super Bowl loss against the Bucs, where he held on to the ball too long, tried to make plays a little bit too much. And he said after that game, in that offseason, to former Ringer employee Kevin Clark, he told him, I was holding on to the ball too long. Sometimes you got to check it down. And we've seen him take that to an extreme this year with the short passes and with the ADOT. But I really think that he's primed to take on this particular challenge that the Eagles defense presents.
Yeah, his average pass, Diante, 6.3 yards past the line of scrimmage. It's 34th in the NFL or something like that. Eagles this season, best defense in the NFL on short passes. So it's kind of like the style that the Eagles are forcing all these quarterbacks to play is kind of how the Chiefs want to play anyway.
1,000%, and I think that what separates this game from so much of what we've talked about in the playoffs is we spent a lot of time previewing one team's strength versus another team's weakness. This is one of the rare occurrences where it's strength on strength, and that's going to have a lot of influence on the way that this game goes. I think for me, the thing I'm most interested in from the Chiefs' offensive perspective is, and we definitely saw this in the conference championship game, they like to put multiple tight ends on the field to really mitigate what defenses can do to their offense. I would say I'm most fascinated to see how that works out in the Super Bowl. Vic Fangio still likes to keep 5 defensive backs on the field, even if you're in 12 personnel, and they trust that they can play man. They trust that Cooper DeJean will fit the run. They trust that their light boxes aren't going to be exploited. I'm really fascinated to see how Patrick Mahomes manages that, if he's got to deal with a lot of tight coverage, the way he did against Houston, right? I think that it's going to take some scrambling, it's going to take some extending, and there's really going to be a lot on his shoulders. I think Steven has been talking about it throughout the last 2 weeks. In terms of a test for Mahomes, we are obviously multiple years past that Tampa Bay game, but if we want to talk about him at the absolute peak of his powers, at the absolute apex of the NFL, this would be the game that would truly cement that no matter what you do defensively, he's always going to have the answer, and if that's what we come out of it with, I can't wait to see what the conversation would be.
I feel like Vic's defense like is going to give him the platform to show the depth of his talent and like how he's evolved over the last couple of years and what type of quarterback he is. I still think it's underappreciated just because you see the flashy plays. And I think when you think of Mahomes, you think of like the no-look passes, the sidearm passes. You don't really think of the bombs anymore, but there was a time when you thought about that. And now he's become this version or this generation's Tom Brady, essentially. Like he plays a boring brand of quarterback right now, but it wins games, and it always has won games. Throughout the history of the NFL, even going back to the last generation of quarterbacks, it was Peyton Manning, it was Drew Brees, it was Tom Brady. He does it in a slightly different way, and he gives you that extra outside of structure, but it's the same brand of quarterback in the pocket.
Yeah, there's that stat that has gotten more popular in recent years about how often a quarterback throws into tight windows. And I feel like it can tell you a different story. Like we've talked about it with Dak Prescott, and it's like scheme's not giving him anything. Mahomes never he's got one of the lowest rates of throwing into a tight window. For him, I think it speaks to what you're talking about. Just he knows how to get to the best option on every play. And so he's finding the open receiver almost every single time. Like if you ran the models and all those things and were like, where's the ideal place to go with the football here? That's where Mahomes goes with the football every single time. And you're right. There's been different versions of him. I like the previous version. Don't get me wrong.
Me too.
We all do. But you're right that this version should be appreciated, where it might be a little more boring to watch, and they're methodically moving the ball down the field. But it's so important because as you guys were talking, I'm thinking, about this we haven't spoken about this as a legacy game for Mahomes, but he's got, like, you look at the Chiefs wide receivers versus the Eagles defensive backs. Eagles have more talent. You look at his offensive line versus the Eagles defensive line. You'd probably give the edge to the Eagles defensive line. He doesn't have a great running back, and he's going up against the best defense in the NFL. And we're still all expecting him to play well and for their offense to play well. It kind of speaks to how much a quarterback at the peak of his powers can accommodate for everything else.
I feel like he's really made this like an art, like the quick passing game. And it's really funny. Like, I remember 2 years ago, we were talking about not only the Chiefs deep ball going away, but the Bills deep ball going away because teams were playing a lot of too high. What the Bills did with Josh Allen was like, screw it. We're just going to throw the ball even deeper. Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid decided, well, if they're not going to let us get the deep ball, we got to, reconstruct this offense so we could beat them with the short passes. And that's what happened. And to your point, like, I think that's why some of those, like, tight window throws, yards after catch, some of those stats are misleading when you compare them to other quarterbacks who are playing a different role in their offense. And I think it was before the Texans playoff game, DeMeco Ryans was asked about how Mahomes is always throwing to open receivers, and DeMeco Ryans was like, it's because of him. It's not because necessarily because of the scheme. Some of that is scheme stuff, especially on the screens, but it's because of how he moves and how he manipulates defenses, and then the processing, finding the open guy. He's an amazing quarterback to watch, and he's like the connoisseur's quarterback at this point. And I would say that wasn't the case even 3 years ago.
I love you bringing up the fact that the way he plays is an art, and this comes back again to the conversations we've been having all playoffs. The quarterbacks that have been eliminated, all of the reasons why they were eliminated don't apply to him. The Vikings don't really have a running game they can lean on. Sam Darnold is not a fast enough processor to get the ball out to protect this offense. They go home. Matthew Stafford, they have a run game, not a lot of receivers that can separate. He's not a guy that can extend. The same thing existed for the Packers with Jordan Love. You think about C.J. Stroud, his response to pressure. You think about Lamar Jackson, some of the turnovers. There are just so many conversations that we have had over the last month or so about these great quarterbacks, these guys who may end up being Hall of Famers, in some case probably closer to that than anything, and they still have not been able to get over the hump because they don't have the answers in their tool belt that Patrick Mahomes has. And I think that in this game, for all the ways that he's going to be challenged, it does speak a lot, the way that you said, Sheil, that we feel confident about where his place is in this game, that he's probably not going to be rocked from his game. He's going to be able to be consistent on a down-to-down basis, and it's just going to be a matter of whether or not his teammates do enough to lift the water beneath them to get them over the top.
I was talking to you about this the other night. Whenever you hear defensive coaches or even offensive coaches talk about that, like, bend but don't break style of defense or any style of defense, they're always like, there's always a caveat. It's like, yeah, this is going to work, but like against the great ones, it won't work. Like, make them go 12 for 12. Let's see. The great ones can do it. Well, he is the great one with a capital G.
Yeah.
Third and long this year, he's still been the best quarterback in the NFL with this supporting cast. I mean, it's incredible. Now, I got it. So we're talking about the way the Chiefs are going to play, and we feel like we have a handle on it. Mm-hmm. However, playoff games are weird. Super Bowls are weird, where a team is doing one thing the whole season, and then they surprise you with something else. I'm curious about the Chiefs' ability to produce explosive plays. on paper, you would say it's not going to happen in this game. That's what the Fangio takes away. You look at Mahomes' numbers when he throws deep; they're among the worst in the NFL because of the supporting cast largely. But Andy Reid has had 2 weeks here to look at this defense. Diante, what will you be surprised? Do you think are the Chiefs going to come into this game and say we're going to string together methodical drives, or would you? Maybe we get a surprise on the first, second possession where all of a sudden they get a 40-yard bomb. They've cooked something up to Xavier Worthy, and now it's a different type of game than we expected.
I wouldn't be surprised because you have to try to test that defense to see if you get a personality change by doing something else, right? I think that was a big issue in the NFC Championship game against Washington. Obviously, they have that great high-tempo, long drive to open the game, and then they just continue to rely upon the quick passing game and an inability to run the ball in between the tackles. They didn't have another answer. And that's not to say that just because you throw it deep against Philadelphia, you'll be successful because you have to deal with Jalen Carter. You do have to deal with Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith as pass rushers. You have to deal with Milton Williams as pass rushers. And they have just a great coverage unit, period, across the board. But I think you have to take those chances, especially with the speed you have on the field, just to put that in the back of the minds of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, of Reed Blankenship, of Cooper DeJean, that I can't just go jump the bubble screen because I don't know what else can be happening. I can't just go jump that Travis Kelce stick route because it might be a double move. I can't just assume this running back is running out to the flat and won't break up the field just because that's what we've seen on tape. And like you said, Andy Reid, out of bye weeks, this has been throughout his entire coaching career one of the best in the NFL. You were writing this week
21-4.
Exactly. You were writing this week about him with opening scripts, one of the best teams in terms of opening scripts. If you look over the span of his coaching tenure in Kansas City and Philadelphia, I would not be surprised at all. Even if it doesn't score, we don't see Patrick Mahomes take one of those long, deep dropbacks and just uncork a couple just to see if you can get Xavier Worthy or Hollywood Brown open deep.
That's what the 2019 Super Bowl was against the 49ers. It was like they were getting nothing early on, but they were gathering information and intel. And by the third quarter, I felt like they had a beat on what the 49ers were doing. And at that point, it was over.
Right.
Like they run the wasp play because they knew what the coverage was going to be. And if they get that on Vic Fangio, which I think you can do, like I love Vic Fangio as a coach. I think he's a great defensive coordinator, but he will come in with a plan, and I don't think he's going to deviate from that plan. He's going to have like a handful of coverages that he's going to throw at you. If Andy Reid can give Mahomes the opening script that allows him to kind of download that information and then utilize it in the second half, I think they're going to have some success in the second half. I could see them getting off to a slow start and then kind of exploding in the second half. And then another thing that's unique to the Super Bowl environment, and their pass game coordinator, Joe Blameyer, said this to me, and I hadn't thought about it before. He's like, in the Super Bowl, you have all these extra commercial breaks. You have a 30-minute halftime. Like, you can actually make real adjustments. I think that's where Andy Reid is a big advantage for Kansas City compared to Philadelphia's coaching staff, especially on the offensive side for Philadelphia. I don't see Kellen Moore coming up with those answers in the heat of the game, especially when it's his first Super Bowl, and Andy Reid's been here, what, is this his fifth?
5 times, I think.
I've lost track. I don't know. He's just here every, he like Patrick Mahomes. He can book his Airbnb.
It's his sixth.
You talked about Fangio. The approach, Diante. When you look at, we talked about kind of the Chiefs side of it, what they might do, what we might see. We feel like we know how Fangio typically plays, but when he's game planning for this game, what do you think are kind of the keys to the way the Eagles want to play?
So in studying just like what he likes to do defensively, schematically, some of the philosophies he takes on, I would not be surprised at all if he looks at Travis Kelce the same way a team would look at Justin Jefferson or the other number one receivers in the NFL, which is to say, whatever we're doing on the back end centers around this guy. If he's in this location, we want to play quarters. If he's in this location, we want to play cover 2 over him. If he's in this location, we want to play man. And I think that they have an advantage in that way to at least be able to execute that schematically because of how versatile Cooper DeJean is. I don't think that he's going to be matched up on Travis Kelce per se, but that allows you to stay in those nickel personnel packages even when offenses are getting heavier. And now if you have a coverage advantage just by body types, that does free you up to do a little bit more on the back end. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is depending on what Kansas City thinks about their left guard matchup versus Milton Williams, which is what we assume is going to be the biggest hole if they don't make any changes. If they do move Joe Thuney back to left guard, now you've got a left tackle problem that they've been dealing with all season long. I'm really fascinated to see whether it's simulated pressures, stunts. They've done a lot of bringing Cooper DeJean off of edges. They like to bring Zach Bond down to the line of scrimmage. They can use Orem Burks the way they use Nakobe Dean, where he was playing a lot of downhill when they were running creepers and simulated pressures. I think that he's going to try to pick on the same way Chris Jones will do, probably to Mekhi Becton on the other side, trying to identify the fish, and they're just going to send as many different bodies as you can. at them to try to put stress on Patrick Mahomes pre-snap, thinking no matter what I want to do with this play, I know I have to have half an eye over here because it might be a matchup disadvantage for us.
I do wonder if extra attention to Kelsey kind of works in Kansas City's favor, just because not only does it like open things up, I think it does give you some type of pre-snap tell, because you have to adjust your alignment in some way to be able to throw a double team at Travis Kelsey.
Right.
But I do think Fangio has a lot of like naturally built-in tactics in his defense where you're getting those natural double teams on Kelsey, especially if he's running over the middle of the field. You usually have like a free defender lurking around 10 to 15 yards, picking up those crossing routes. I do find it interesting what they'll do in the red zone. I think that's where that's going to matter. And I think this game is really, on that side of the ball particularly, it's going to be won or lost in the red zone.
Yeah, it absolutely could. I think going down the field, like you mentioned, tight zone coverage. Fangio's not a blitz guy anyway.
Right.
Maybe once in a while you throw something out there, but the 4-man pass rush, tight zone coverage, and you see, if you take Kelsey away, can those other guys show up? I mean, I just feel like Mahomes in a big spot on the biggest stage, like, which of those guys does he trust? He's going to have to. Is he going to trust Marquise Brown, who he hasn't played a lot of football with, Xavier Worthy, a rookie? So I think if you're Fangio, you force him to show that he trusts those guys, and if they make plays, then you adjust after that. So I
think the best game script for Fangio is what's been happening throughout the playoffs, which is you stop the run, right? Even if you can't stop their best thing, which is Patrick Mahomes having the ball in his hands, you want to try to eliminate all other options, right? You're not going to be able to run the ball between the tackles, something that Kansas City really hasn't been able to do over the last month and a half anyways. You try to take away Travis Kelsey to as much as you can, and I don't expect him to win every rep, because you are going to end up with Oren Burks in coverage. That's a matchup advantage for Kansas City. You're going to end up with Reed Blankenship over him. That should be a matchup advantage for Kansas City, but you try to flood bodies over there, and I think you do trust Quinion Mitchell, you trust Darius Slay, you trust Cooper DeJean, that they'll have their best day in coverage, very similar to how Houston played them in the divisional round, and Houston played them really well. The game was just broken by Patrick Mahomes extending, and I think if you're a defensive coordinator, the truth of the matter is, for as good as Mahomes is as that, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you have to keep the ball in his hands and force him to be perfect as that kind of football player.
Yeah. What's the matchup, Ruiz? Is it that interior offensive line? What the Chiefs do? Is there one matchup that kind of has your attention before we move on to the other side of the ball?
I honestly think, Nolan Smith, Jawan Taylor, I think is the matchup. I think that's going to be a matchup that Philadelphia wants to become a big thing in this game. If it is, I think that's their advantage. And then how do you deal with that? And especially if you have problems at left tackle and right tackle, because you can, if it's only one problem, you can throw a tight end there, you can throw a chip block there, the running back before he releases. If it's two on both sides, if you're offering help to both tackles, you only have, 3 eligibles left over? Yeah. That's not a winning model, especially against a defense that's so good about flooding the field with coverage.
Yeah, I think the interior offensive line, too, like you mentioned, Diante Caliendo is the fish on that offensive line, and do they help him out? Are you blocking Jalen Carter one-on-one with Trey Smith? Because other teams have done that this year. Like some good guards have, kept Jalen Carter, not the whole game, but like a game that you would live with. And Trey Smith has been fantastic. So do you do that? Do you slide Tooney, or do you slide Creed Humphrey over there and help out Caliendo against Milton? Milton Williams could be a big player in this game because Carter hasn't moved on that defense.
I do wonder, is this the game where you move him? It's been 2 weeks. This is the Super Bowl. You throw everything out. If I'm Fangio, I'm hunting the fish. I'm fishing. I'm going for Caliendo, and I would rather have my best pass rusher over him.
Yeah. The numbers have been so weird. He's just left defensive tackle every 2-3 snaps here and there, but other than that, he's lined up in that one place. You're right. It's something to watch early in this game. By the way, Jalen Carter did have an illness this week.
Didn't show up to press availability during
They made him play on the right in practice, and his stomach couldn't handle it.
It's like when I don't get it to sit in the right chair.
Got vertigo being on the other side.
No, if he's a creature of routine like I am, I totally understand there. So the other matchup you mentioned, Diante, is just Eagles defensive backs versus Chiefs wide receivers. I mean, just in terms of sticky coverage, on paper, Eagles should have an advantage. All it takes is one play where somebody runs past Darius Slay. But on paper, the way those guys have played, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Darius Slay, against those Chiefs wide receivers, I do think that's an advantage for the Eagles.
But is it against the Chiefs receivers, or is it against Andy Reid? Especially if he knows they're playing cover one. Because I feel like that's where the Chiefs still have it. You play cover one, they look like, not the old Chiefs where they're bombing it downfield, but the offense we saw 2 years ago when they played the Eagles, when they were the best offense in the league, despite the fact that they weren't pushing the ball downfield.
Yeah, man. I mean, I know you don't just choose zone or man. I think the man snaps will be very limited in this game. I mean, if you just look at it from an Eagles perspective, what the Chiefs have done well this season, what the Eagles want to do anyway. But as we always talk about, it's a one-off. So, like on a third down in the third quarter, you might show something or surprise them and do something that you don't typically do. Because how else are you going to beat Mahomes? If he knows what you're doing, you're going to be dead. Anyway,
this is an NFL game too. In the NFL, there's always going to be a time where you have to play man coverage.
Yes, no doubt.
It's not like Big 12 football where you can just play quarters all the time. So I think it's going to come up in a big spot, and whoever wins that matchup, I think it could decide the game because I do think this is a evenly matched matchup.
Yeah, when you bring up Reed, they've still had that, like you said, that fastball against man coverage. You were talking about the Texans approach in the regular season. You were yelling at coordinators, what are you doing? Don't be playing this man against the Chiefs. And you were right. I mean, all the numbers back it up that that's not the way to beat them. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We're going to move to the other side of the ball. Eagles offense versus the Chiefs defense. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Eagles offense versus, if you had to choose, this might be a dumb question, I don't know, but like as I think about it, because sometimes you know on Radio Row you get a little more generic question like, what's the most important aspect of this game? If you had to, like, if someone asked you that, because it is kind of hard, you could go in any direction. If someone said just what's the most important aspect or matchup in this game that's going to determine who wins or loses, what do you choose before we move on?
Chiefs defensive front versus the Eagles offensive line.
All right, so that's what we're getting
I'm
into.
assuming that the Eagles offensive line is going to win the matchup. It's about how badly they win the matchup. If it's a significant win, then I think the Eagles probably win this game by 7 to 10 points.
Okay.
If it's close, I think the Chiefs have the advantage. I think it's that big of a swing.
Yeah. Diante, how do you answer?
I'm going to sound like such a football coach right now. It's ball security for both teams.
Okay.
It's Jalen Hurts in the pocket. You're going to have some snaps where the pocket gets crushed, where Chris Jones is hunting for whatever the weak link is, where they bring a simulated pressure or an overload blitz like we saw in the AFC Championship game that ended that one. Is he going to understand how to navigate around that and still protect the football while looking for an option to throw the ball to? That's something that he really struggled with in the first month of the season. We talked about it going into the bye week. They come out. Obviously, it was a huge point of emphasis. Be safe with the football. Get out of the pocket early if you don't feel good. Take the sliding sack instead of just hanging out. Throw the ball away if need be. This is a game, and we'll get into it, obviously, talking about this matchup between Eagles offense and Chiefs defense. It's going to be hard to beat Steve Spagnuolo if you don't take chances, if you're not willing to hang in the pocket. And that means there's a lot of stress now on your quarterback to be wise with the football, to be an anticipatory thrower when it's time to do that, and to play a simple game when it's available to him. And I'm really interested to see if he can protect the ball. And on the other side, Eagles defense, they talk about bend, don't break. Offense will make a mistake if we make them go 10 to 15 plays. We've seen that manifested in each one of their playoff games. They've been forcing a bunch of turnovers. Cooper DeJean, Zach Bond, Reed Blankenship punching the ball out, attacking the football. I'm interested to see if those Chiefs playmakers can hold on to the ball out in open space for as good an open field tackling team as they've been all year.
Hey, Eagles have been punching that ball out very consistently, especially like the second half of the season there. I think I've settled on Spags versus Hurts. Hurts doesn't have to be Superman in this game, but can he do enough? So let's get into that matchup, Eagles offense versus the Chiefs defense. Diante, you wrote about Spags for the Ringer. When you look at it, you just touched on it there. What are the keys to Steve Spagnuolo's approach? What do you want to see from Jalen Hurts? Like what's good and what's good enough where you say, all right, he didn't have to throw for 300, but if he does X, Y, and Z, the Eagles can still win with him playing this certain type of way.
To me, it's not panicking when the early down stuff isn't working.
Okay.
I expect Steve Spagnuolo early in the game to really sell out to stop the run. I think we're going to see a lot of zero blitzes. We're going to see a lot of bringing guys off the edge. Going to try to force them to get into what worked against Washington. I will give them credit for it. All those RPOs, the boots, things like that. You want to force them into that because all of those are more opportunities to take the football out of Saquon Barkley's hands. And it's going to be on Jalen Hurts in those situations to take the dump off to Dallas Goedert when it's there. To be able to identify pre-snap where Justin Reed is, where's Drew Tranquil, where's Trent McDuffie, where do they like to blitz when teams are in these types of formations? How can we solve our problems? And by extension, we're talking about Kellen Moore. And there's been a lot of justifiable criticism of Jalen Hurts for his execution of this offense. And I don't know if we've spent enough time on Kellen Moore trying to find a good marriage between the run and the pass, the right way to employ his personnel groupings at all times. You talked about opening script for Kansas City. I think the exact same thing exists for Philadelphia. They have got to be able to employ their tight ends, their wide receivers to the best of their ability to get those pre-snap tells as often as possible, so that way Jalen Hurts can play a simple game. Because if we see in the first half a bunch of third and obvious, a bunch of second and longs, that's trouble for this offense.
Yeah, Ruiz, where I think I know where you're at with that matchup, but what kind of performance would Hurts deliver where you say, all right, he exceeded my expectations, or he kind of did enough in those key passing situations?
I feel like what we saw against Washington. I said that after the pod. Like, this was the best version we've seen of him in 2 years since they last played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I think if you look back at that game, I know the Eagles scored a lot of points, but I think Spag's game plan worked. Like, you can't look at the game plan and judge the effectiveness of it based on the final score. Like, what did you try to take away, and did you take it away? You tried to take away the Eagles' run game. He took it away. Jalen Hurts threw some good passes. The receivers made some good plays. They won a lot of 50-50 balls in the air, and that was the difference. That's why they scored. If they play the same exact game and force Jalen Hurts to do that again and force A.J. Brown to dunk on 2 receivers, force Dallas Goedert to make an acrobatic catch on the sideline, force Devontae Smith to do the same. Is it going to happen again? I don't know if lightning's going to strike twice again. And if it does, then I'm going to be coping on the podcast after.
But, I mean, what you just described, it's kind of like the story of this game. Like, all those guys you mentioned are incredible. They have so many incredible players around him. You know, it's kind of like, can you count on that? Can you not count on that? It's like, maybe you can count on it, you know?
I mean, the A.J. Brown one, you throw it into double coverage and you, dekes the guy with, faking looking up and then readjust. An amazing play. But is that going to happen again?
Plays. Maybe not that exact one, but there have been, and this isn't this year, but that year specifically, there were so many examples of Hurts on paper should not make this throw, and A.J. Brown comes down with it and dunks on somebody. It's kind of like just for all the X's and O's and schematics we talk about. Sometimes it's going to be A.J. Brown versus a guy who he can just dunk on, or a tackle he can break on a slant where it's a 6-yard pass and all of a sudden it's an explosive play. So you're right. I mean, it's hard to predict. You don't know how many you can count on, but that's kind of the story of the Eagles passing game. You know?
It's also, can the Chiefs make that happen? Because I don't think that's how the Eagles wanted to play the game. I think if you told Shane Steichen before that game, we're going to rely on A.J. Brown winning a 2-on-1 down the field. We're going to rely on Dallas Goedert making this amazing catch on the sideline after Jalen Hurts gets fooled by coverage and makes a bad decision. I think he would have been like, oh, no, we're going to lose this game.
Right.
Yeah. So we shall see.
And I think to the point that you're making of oversimplification, there's nothing saying that because the Chiefs blitz on early downs that Saquon Barkley still can't make a guy miss, or that they can't pick it up. You know, I do think that there are times, and definitely Washington, we saw a little bit of it from Los Angeles in the divisional round, not so much from Green Bay. We have seen teams really load up the line of scrimmage to be able to take away 5-yard gains or turn 5-yard gains into 2-yard gains. We haven't seen anybody take away the explosive run, and that's really what Philadelphia's offense is based on. Yes, they enjoy the fact that they can get 4 to 6 yards on command, but the thing that breaks the will of the defenses that they're playing against is that you can be in single high. You can run one of those run blitzes, and Saquon Barkley can still make a move, or you still get Lane Johnson throwing a guy out the club, or Jordan Mailata can still throw a guy out the club, or you get your Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson combo block, where you're just moving a bunch of guys on the interior. That's still a possibility. Obviously, that's the best version of things for Philadelphia. I will say, to answer your original question about what does it need to look like for Hurts for you to feel good, if you complete 20 to 25 passes to me for Hurts, it doesn't have to be 300 yards, but if you're efficient with your completions and you're not taking a bunch of sacks, that to me would be perfect for the Eagles offense, because now it's taking stress off of what Steve Spagnuolo can do to Hurts on those early downs.
It's the net passing yards that's going to matter with him, and it has mattered with him. It's kind of been like a discrepancy between the traditional box score, and then when you look at the advanced metrics, you're like, oh, I can see the flaws there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I think the one thing to watch, if you're watching from home and you're watching the game, when they run the ball, are the offensive linemen getting to the second level?
Yes.
Are the double team blocks are happening? Basically, I think what the Chiefs do really well, they disguise their run fits, and they make it hard to get those double teams, because you have to know where the double team is before the snap to really be comfortable with it and to play fast. And if they're changing the looks after and the double team was supposed to be here, but now it's here, that's going to be tough. But Saquon is Saquon. Yeah. And that's, like you said, that's the story of this offense. They win those 50-50 battles.
I feel like Saquon's football career has kind of been,
that. It's been exactly that.
It's been kind of leading to this moment, too. I mean, when you just look high school, college, and then you get in the NFL, and you can only be so good when, as a running back when you don't have the offensive line. And it's like, I keep thinking, I've been saying all week, like, if the Giants offer $2 million more or whatever,
we're probably not even having this conversation. About Saquon, about Philadelphia.
Right. I mean, there's many layers. It's like Barkley, he's deprived of having the season in his career. Like, I'm sure somewhere inside of him he knew, like, man, if I just get in a better spot, he's trying to make the best of his situation. But I don't know if he knew or he didn't know. Yeah. He might not have known that, like, this type of season was possible for him, that it was going to be this much of a difference to be playing with a good offensive line and a running back and a quarterback who's a running threat and an offensive line coach who can scheme it up in different ways, like you mentioned, even when the opponent's stacking the box. So it's like all those moments, and it's just like, it feels weird to say. And it might be very dumb to say now, and you can play it back Sunday night, but I can't envision a scenario where this is just like a 15 carries for 60 yard type game for Saquon Barkley.
I mean, if you're Kellen Moore, there's no way this game is ending that way. Even if we're down in the game, this guy is leaving this football game with 20 to 30 touches guaranteed.
It feels like there was the 2014 Seahawks-Packers game when they had that furious comeback. Were you covering the team then, Seattle?
No, that was the year before.
They didn't stop running the football with Marshawn Lynch, and he kind of helped that. He kind of spurred that comeback along because he was making explosive plays, and I think Saquon is that type of player. And I'm like not only happy for Saquon, but I'm happy for like football fans who get to watch this guy. Like,
we could have been deprived of it too.
He's the guy I'm most excited to see live. I've never seen him play live. I can't wait to see this guy run. I hope he breaks a long one.
Yeah, I mean, he's just he's been incredible. I can only imagine his emotion. I can kind of just like picture the sweat on his face before the game starts. I mean, he's never had a moment like this.
Dave Gettleman, he was right all along?
Maybe. He is incredible. He's been incredible. It's been a joy to watch just from like a professional standpoint, to just like watch him live every week, watch him on film every week, and I'm just like, man, I thought I had watched good running backs before. I've never seen anything like this. Never seen anything like this. Some of the matchups. So we got into Hurts versus Spags. We got into the Eagles' run game. Diante, what other specific matchups have you interested in this?
I mean, we could probably return to the conversation we had on Tuesday, which is what do they do? What does Kansas City do in the back end to match up with this receiving core?
What are they going to do with McDuffie?
I am so fascinated by the McDuffie piece of this. I'm very fascinated with what they do with Justin Reed. How do you match up with Dallas Goedert? How do you match up with A.J. Brown? I think that Philadelphia's offense is at their best when they're not getting cute, right? When it's A.J. Brown on the outside, Devontae Smith in the slot, and Dallas Goedert is maybe the one chess piece that you can kind of play around with. I'm really interested to see if they're able to, if they take that stance again, if Philadelphia's offense takes that stance again, how does Kansas City punish them for it? Can they punish them for it? And what kind of matchups do you have to draw up if you're Steve Spagnuolo to make sure that you can take away A.J. Brown over the top, you can take away Dallas Goedert's yards after the catch, that you can take away Devontae Smith over the middle of the field? That's not going to break your structural integrity when it comes to stopping Saquon Barkley, which is still the heartbeat of this offense. It's a big challenge. That's probably the reason why they're in the Super Bowl, is for all their issues throughout the year. You can always bank on the fact that we just have better humans than you do more often than not.
Story of their season,
you know,
it really
and that's what they've been leaning on. And I definitely think if Philadelphia is going to win, that's going to be the conversation we're having after the game. Is Spags had the right play call here, the right play call here, he had the right personnel on here. These guys should have been in all these great positions. And then a guy did get dunked on. Saquon Barkley did make somebody miss. Jalen Hurts did get that big scramble, where they had that great design quarterback run to the short side of the field, and they didn't have enough bodies there to fit it. That's just been the story of this thing. They can play simple football because they've just got better players than everybody else.
That's why it's so nice to have those like points of reference players. Like a guy like A.J. Brown, it doesn't matter if Jalen Hurts reads the coverage right. He could just throw it up to him and he'll make a play. Yep. Anyways, I think a big deal in this game is like the pre-snap presentation from Spags. If Jalen doesn't know, for instance, that he has A.J. Brown one-on-one in cover one down the field, he might not throw it to him, even if he is going to dunk on the guy and he does get open. But if he has to come to it after the snap and kind of process his way to it, I think maybe there won't be an issue because they're not getting the ball. If A.J. Brown's not getting targets down the field, that's the only way to really win that matchup, is to prevent those targets. Because you're not winning the matchup if he gets the target.
Right.
Yeah, the man coverage numbers we talked about with Mahomes, The splits are very similar.
It applies,
He's third in EPA per pass play against man coverage, and that speaks to the support. If he can just pick, hey, which matchup do I want? Those guys are going to win pretty consistently. So to Ruiz, to your point, Spags can come in with a zone-heavy game plan, but there will be snaps where you're getting cover one, where you're getting man coverage. Do they recognize it, and do they burn it like Hurts has been doing for most of the season? So, yeah, the McDuffie thing is very interesting to me, where he's going to line up. The other one is up front, Chris Jones versus Mekhi Becton, which you alluded to earlier. But Mekhi Becton's been fantastic in the run game, mauling people. If you have to pick out the weak link on the Eagles' offensive line in terms of pass protection,
it's pretty clearly him.
Specifically, one-on-one, but also in terms of just like, hey, what are we doing here with this, crazy look we're getting from Spags? So I do think Chris Jones versus Mekhi Becton is the other matchup I got my eyes on.
I mean, and that's going to be on Kellen Moore to fix, right? Yeah. It's Kellen Moore's job to make sure that he's addressing that on every snap with how they're setting up protections, with how they're setting up passing concepts. You're going to have to be careful about how you balance a quick passing game that allows Kansas City to jump on you, because that's really what they want you to do, is to quit on pushing the ball down the field and just throw the ball quickly where guys can just trigger and go make tackles out in space. We talked about Philadelphia being one of the best open field tackling teams. If they're number one, number two, and with the very small margin distance between the two is Kansas City, I think that for Kellen Moore, if you were just able to design a plan for a guy like Chris Jones, and a plan for Chris Jones doesn't mean he only has 3 pressures. It means that he doesn't have 3 sacks, right? If you're just able to kind of neutralize him more often than not, that does open the door now for you to feel like we can run a regular passing game. And if they can run a regular passing game for as many issues as I've taken with the concepts we've seen throughout the years, because of the matchup advantages, they probably they would be just fine, I would think.
The concern is that if you sell out to stop Chris Jones, that's when Spags starts cooking.
Exactly.
That's like he weaponizes the fact that you have to do that against Chris Jones. And the other part of this is that the side that Mekhi Becton lines up on matters, because if Chris Jones wins on that side of the ball and flushes Jalen Hurts out to his left, that becomes a problem for Jalen Hurts, because he's not a great thrower to his left. He's not flexible enough to really throw across his body. I mean, he's made some plays, but if you look at over the larger sample size, he's not very good.
Jones says, I think this year, I haven't checked all the numbers from previous years, but I was surprised just looking at where he's lining up. They always point out the occasional he lined up. He's had over 100 snaps at left defensive end, right defensive end, left defensive tackle, right defensive tackle. So when you're breaking the huddle and going to the line of scrimmage, you don't know right away where he's going to be, and you got to figure that out on the fly as well. All right, take one more break. We come back, we'll do our 3 props, and then it's finally prediction time for Super Bowl. What is it? 59. I got the number right. There you go.
LIX. Super Bowl LIX.
Super Bowl LIX. All right, we're back on the Ringers NFL show. Our picks contest all season long. We've done 3 apiece. I'm 3 behind Ruiz going into this game. Diante, you're eliminated, but you're playing for pride.
That's 1,000%.
You know what I mean? You're a football guy.
Biting kneecaps.
Start us off. What is your first pick here in our contest?
I'm taking A.J. Brown for an anytime touchdown. I do think that, we'll get to kind of how I think the rest of the game will play out. I think that for Philadelphia, just like we talked about Kansas City taking early shots, you need to put in these safeties' heads that they've got to keep their depth. You need to put in Spagnuolo's head. If we blitz and we don't get home quickly, they're going to find the one-on-one to be able to take advantage of it. If Trent McDuffie's on them or not, and we saw that in the first game that they played a couple years ago in the Super Bowl, you can go take that chance as long as there's not a guy over the top. And I think to stop Saquon Barkley, we're going to see a lot of blitzes and a lot of single high, and that means that you're going to have early downs that allow you to use the play action game, that allow you to go max protection, let Jalen Hurts get enough time to diagnose what he's seeing and go take those deep chances. I would not be surprised at all if he's able to go rip off a big one.
It only takes one.
I like it. There you go. All right, I'm up next. I feel like we haven't done many anytime. I'm doing anytime touchdown too. For Jalen Hurts, you're telling me we're not getting one brotherly shove in this game? Now, maybe the Chiefs have something to, they had something for Josh Allen, so we'll see what they cook up. But we know what the Eagles do. They get inside that 3-yard line, and if it's first down, if it's second down, we know what they're going to do. So that's minus 115. I was like, I can use that because we got to do minus 120 or better. So I've got Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown for my first pick. Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm going to keep it going. Travis Kelce anytime touchdown. Wow. And I'll tell you the route he's going to score on against the coverage. Red zone, out and up against quarters. It's a route they ran against Philadelphia in the first Super Bowl. It's a route they ran with I think it was Hollywood Brown against the Texans. It's one of their go-to plays in the red zone, especially when they see a lot of quarters, and I think they're going to see quarters in the red zone against Vic Fangio.
What a game we're going to get. A.J. Brown scoring a touchdown. We forget about
the kind of game that we're after. Yeah, the kind of game that we want to see.
There you go. That's his first one. Diante, what do you have for number 2?
Next one is going to be Patrick Mahomes over 275 passing yards.
Wow.
I think that, to me, if Kansas City is going to have an opportunity to win this football game, it's going to come with accepting that the run game just has not been there for them this year, especially on the back half of the season. We've seen this throughout the playoffs. I think our buddy Ben Solak was talking about that when he was speaking with Mina Kimes on their show, right? They've been replacing a lot of their runs in between the tackles with design plays for Xavier Worthy, with design plays for Hollywood Brown, whether it's the RPO game, the swings, the end arounds, all of those things. We're going to see much more of that in this game to take chances at moving this defense side to side. And I think that ultimately on early downs, if they want to get into third and manageable and not put Patrick Mahomes against changing coverage pictures on third and obvious, a lot of that's going to come with design rushes, which are going to give other guys opportunity to touch the ball, and throwing those quick bubble screens and just trying to get the ball out of his hands fast.
Andy Reid, when they have a massive advantage running the football, still has to be pushed to run the. In this game against this defense,
I wouldn't be surprised if he just throws his hands up.
I mean, I like really. I couldn't use it for this because I think it was minus 130 or more, but just Mahomes completion. So if anyone's looking to do a parlay two things together, because I'm with you, I think it's gonna be early downs, throw the football early and often. I don't think Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco are going to get a lot of touches in this game. All right, my second one. I've done this every week in the playoffs, and it's hit every week, so I'm not going to change it now. Saquon Barkley, longest rush, over 23.5 yards. Maybe they stop it. I don't know. But the Chiefs have done a good job limiting explosive runs. But, man, it just feels like every single week Saquon Barkley is going to get one. Even if he's getting stopped on a butt, he's going to break one eventually, whether it's the first play of the game like it was previously or whether it's just in the second half after you keep giving him the football. So Saquon Barkley, longest rush, over 23.5 yards. Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm going Jalen Hurts over 27.5 pass attempts. I believe in Spags. I think he's going to make the game plan where the Eagles have to throw the football to win the football game. So I don't know if how many he's going to complete. I don't know how many yards, so I avoided that. But I do think it's going to be a high attempt game. And if they do fall behind, that works to my benefit too.
All right, there you go. Diante, what's your last one of the season? What do you got for us?
Third and final is going to be off the beaten path a little bit. I'm going Eagles players. Over 3.5 Eagles players get a carry in this game. I think that we're going to see Jalen Hurts, obviously, design run game, QB read game. I think you're going to see Saquon Barkley and Kenneth Gainwell get some runs, especially a Gainwell on the third down situation that should be obvious pass, and they're just trying to get to fourth and manageable so they can go for it. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. And I think we get one of those random Dallas Goedert jet sweeps. One of those A.J. Brown jet sweeps, something like that. And I think that that's going to speak to what they need to do in the run game to be diverse enough to where Spags does not know, based off personnel and formation, who's getting the ball and where it's going. I would not be surprised at all to see them try to be a little bit more diverse in the run game and a little bit simpler in the passing game.
Jet sweeps, screens. We saw some middle screens. I think it was in last year's matchup. They were spamming that quite a bit as well. So I'm with you there with the approach. Yeah, they saved that Dallas Goedert jet sweep, but now you can't. I don't want you to get burned by the old
not the tap pass.
Pass.
They got me with that. They got me with that earlier in the season.
But, no, I like that one. I could see that coming through. My last one is Chiefs under rushing yards, 114.5. Basically, you laid this out that I just think they're going to pass the football a lot. I think they can win passing the football a lot, and I would be surprised if this was a big rushing attempts game. They haven't broken many explosive. Here's the Super Bowl. I feel like I have to give the caveats. You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Maybe Kareem
the Mahomes kneels if they win at the end. If Mahomes kneels down because he goes back far.
9 yards. Yeah, there you go. So that's my last one. Chiefs under 114.5 rushing yards. Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm kind of spoiling my prediction, but I'm going Chiefs minus 1.5.
Anyway, okay.
Chiefs 1.5. I'm not betting against Mahomes. That's a small line. I can see the Eagles winning this game, but I think Spags is going to show up. I think Andy Reid's going to be a massive advantage for Philadelphia with his experience. Same for Spags. Same for Patrick Mahomes.
For the Chiefs, see? You had a little slip there.
Oh, yeah.
And Andy Reid for Philadelphia.
Covering my bases, But, I don't know. I just can't get away from the Chiefs winning this game. Even though I think Philadelphia has the better roster, the better team overall.
Yeah.
It's just this is the type of game where quarterback play matters, where coaching matters, where play calling matters. And while I think the Eagles they're good in those areas, the Chiefs are like the best of all time in all three of those areas.
You have a score for us?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 23-17.
23-17. Philadelphia will not be happy with Jalen Hurts, with Kellen Moore, with
We're having the same conversations all over again.
I can't believe we haven't said Jeff Stoutland throughout this pod, because I honestly think that would be my second biggest matchup. Is not Spags versus Kellen Moore, it's Spags versus Jeff Stoutland because of the protection thing and because of the run game.
Eagles offensive line coach. I had a piece on theringer.com with the Eagles' main characters, and you can't talk about it's so funny. Like I don't remember an offensive line coach getting this. You didn't even have to identify him, and I bet most of the listeners knew who he is at this point. But yeah, he's been kind of their secret weapon through various head coaches, various quarterbacks, various offensive linemen. The offensive line is just always good. Injuries, whatever, it doesn't matter. All right, so Ruiz has Chiefs 23. Eagles 17. Diante, what do you got?
A little more high scoring. I'm going Philadelphia 27, Kansas City 23. I think that ultimately the star power wins out. I think they get just enough explosiveness to be able to hold Patrick Mahomes at bay. I think that this game will probably be more tightly contested than the first time they played. Even though obviously it was a very exciting game, went down to the very end, I just think that Philadelphia's defense, the way that they play, they win the game by making enough open field tackles, maybe forcing a turnover to give them the possession edge that they need to be able to get a lead and hold on to it.
27-23. Eagles, listen, I've been going all season long. I've been saying Eagles can't get to the NFC Championship with this passing game. Eagles can't get to the Super Bowl with this passing game. And here they are. So I'm just, like A.J. Brown, he was questioning it before. Then he's like, I don't know. Maybe we can. I'm living the same life, A.J. Brown. I'm saying maybe you can with this running game. I got Saquon Barkley as the MVP. I think he's just going to cap off this season with a huge performance in this game. I think defensively, they're going to do just enough. We know they're not going to shut them down. Maybe it's a red zone stop, whatever. I've got Eagles 24, Chiefs 21. And it feels great going against Patrick Mahomes at a big spot. Yeah,
I've been doing it all year.
Scoring less than 23 points?
I've been doing it all year.
I don't want to end up like Tom Brady before that Giants Super Bowl and someone predicted them scoring like 19 points. He's like, we're going to score 19 points, and then he scored like 17.
Only because of, I think, the possessions could get
I see the same thing. Yeah. I think it's a low possession game.
Yeah.
I think that
because of the way both teams
play. It's different styles, but the same end result. But amazing transformation from Sheil over the course of the season, becoming a running back. Screw the passing game.
I need to get a run the damn ball hat.
1,000%.
You used to mock those hats probably. No more EPA stats either. Next year you're just going to be back to yards per play.
No. Total yards. No total carries. What's the rule of completions plus
that Pete Carroll thing?
The rule of 43 or whatever.
The rule of whatever from 1979 still applies. What's old is new again. All right, there you go. Thank you to Steven Ruiz. Thank you to Diante Lee. We will be back after Super Bowl 59, recapping the game with our guy Christopher Sutton producing, and thank you to Arjuna Ramgopal for the additional production supervision. Until then, everyone enjoy the game. We'll talk to you next time on the Ringer NFL Show.